I'm Laurie Blake. Welcome to the WrestleTalk news, because on Fridays, we wear pink. Our top story is 2 top stars are completely missing from the WWE Draft. Because holy sports admin, Batman, it's only the WWE Draft on SmackDown and Raw tonight and Monday, respectively. The time of the year where WWE tries to make roster management exciting. And no matter what Pete and Luke might say because of Monday Night War, spreadsheets are not cool. Anywho, this year's draft has been promised by Triple H to be a game changer. Pun probably intended. Though so far it's actually just following the same formula as many of the recent drafts, i.e. having pools of superstars split across 2 nights that can only be selected on those specific nights. And it's in the company revealing these pools that people spotted some notable absences. Let's start with a squad to be selected on SmackDown, which includes Becky Lynch, Bianca Belair, Cody Rhodes, Damage Control, Drew McIntyre, Edge, Shinsuke Nakamura, the Street Profits, and perhaps most interestingly, the Bloodline, but only Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa. So Bloodline Meat Edition, as I like to call it. Night 2 of the draft, which will take place on Raw, has the likes of Braun Strowman and Ricochet, Brock Lesnar, Charlotte Flair, Judgment Day, Karrion Kross, Owens and Zayn, Rhea Ripley and Seth Rollins up for grabs, and also Bloodline Seeing Double Edition, as the Usos are now up separately to their family. That whole table is looking a little wobbly. A couple of the legs are missing. No, I wasn't talking about you, table. I was talking about a different table. You're okay. You're all right. Notably absent from either night's list, though, are Bray Wyatt and Alexa Bliss. The gruesome twosome have recently been off screens, with Wyatt believed to be out dealing with an issue, but Bliss has just been sort of missing, despite saying herself that she's not actually on hiatus. Though the lack of their names in the draft is very odd, considering that Drew McIntyre is listed despite also being absent from screens, and AJ Styles is also draftable despite being injured. No, I said draftable, not draft table. You narcissist. It's that Ollie that is making you like that. It's been too soft on him. Leaving little pots of varnish out every night. I know what he's doing. Anyway, another name not listed in either pool is Big E, who has been out since March 2022 after suffering a broken neck. But Big E could be making a big entrance, according to WRKD Wrestling on Twitter, who noted that one name rumoured to return during the upcoming draft is former WWE champion Big E. This goes alongside reports from WWE Creative that plans are already in place and waiting for his return and inevitable reunion with the New Day, and WRKD added to this, saying that one pitch was to have the group feud with Imperium, with Gunther versus Big E for the Intercontinental Championship being the centerpiece to that entire story. Also listed on both draft pools is Select NXT Superstars. Pfeiffer selected some digging and heard that Ilya Dragunov was one of the names pitched for a main roster call-up. They also confirmed PW Insider's reports that Pretty Deadly's names were in the mix, as was Tyler Bate, which came according to WRKD Wrestling. And Cameron Grimes is continuing to find out that a journey to the moon takes a lot longer than you originally thought, as he is reportedly still being considered for a main roster spot, a months-long process at this point. And PW Insider also heard that Bron Breakker and Cora Jade are both scheduled to be backstage on SmackDown this evening, which could mean dark match, but could also mean that they're in line to be drafted, which certainly fits the theory that Breakker would move on to the main roster after dropping the NXT title to Carmelo Hayes. Before we crack on with the rest of our news, we have a word from the sponsor of today's video, brought to you by the newest member of the WrestleTalk news team. That can't be right. You want him to do.
I'm Irish wrestler Turbo Jack, and when I'm not feuding with that no-good son of a bitch Fabian Lenoir, I unwind with Hit Mobile Hero Collection RPG Raid Shadow Legends. Raid just turned 4 years old. There's 2 skeleton jabronis with a cake to celebrate and a goddamn rat. 4 years is how long Turbo Jack held the Inter-Midwest and Atlantic WBBWFC Championship. So Turbo Jack's gonna celebrate Raid the same way WBBWFC Booker Larry Conman celebrated telling me I'll be dropping the strap. A dinner party attended by his 4 best champions with knife skills. Raglan's at Turbo Jack's table because she's the best reviver at Raid. Tatora Reinhardt is invited because he's got a veil that can increase defense for the Doom Tower. Cardiel is there because he's got freaking wings. And Cleopteryx because she's great against the Hydra. And available to everyone through daily login rewards. Also this April, find the Egg in Raid. Download Raid using our links below, copy your in-game player ID, Then go to egghunt.plarium.com from April 14th to May 15th to go on an exciting AR adventure. Find a dragon egg, and you can win real-life prizes. Download Raid using Turbo Jack's link in the video description or scan the QR code on screen now for insane bonuses like Epic Champion Talia, energy refills, XP boosters, and more.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug. Now, while much of the news surrounding NXT's exciting call-up related stuff, for others on the roster, things are not good in the hood. That's because there's been a bit of an injury epidemic going on at the moment in the black and gold brand, because in recent months we've seen Nikita Lyons, Wendy Chu, Sol Ruka, and even NXT Women's Champion Indy Hartwell all being struck down. Ruka suffered a torn ACL and was written off of TV in a backstage attack segment on this week's show, while Hartwell suffered an ankle injury during her triple threat title match with Tiffany Stratton and Roxanne Perez. Now, despite Hartwell finishing the match, she would be seen leaving the WWE Performance Center sporting a walking boot, according to Wrestling Observer's Brian Alvarez. So what's the common thread amongst all of these injured NXT stars, I hear you ask? Well, if you haven't already noticed, they're all women. Well, that's rather strange, no? While this could also be a coincidence, according to Dave Meltzer, it could instead be something to do with WWE's current training regime. Meltzer explained, there's a lot of injuries there. A lot of people are blaming the strength training that they're doing, heavy lifts as opposed to strengthening surrounding muscles to prevent injuries. People have brought up to me there's a lot of injuries, especially on the women's side. There's a lot of women's injuries right now in NXT. Brian Alvarez would add to this that he had heard from those on the NXT roster regarding WWE's training. Alvarez revealed some talent were complaining about the style of training that they're told to do. A lot of people want to just be able to train on their own. Now, while the female roster seems particularly affected, it's worth mentioning that top male star Grayson Waller also suffered an injury scare this past Tuesday during his NXT Championship match with Carmelo Hayes. So all in all, it's a pretty unfortunate turn of events, and we at WrestleTalk would like to wish all involved the best with their recoveries. Do you hear that? No, not you, Table. That being whispered on the wind? Why, it's a WWE name change blowing in. And while usually that just sends a shiver right up your spine, this week's whisper is actually kind of a positive thing. Especially for Emma, who no longer has to live with the shame of dating somebody called Madcap Moss, because he's so zany. Because now, according to WWE's roster page, Madcap has regained his former name of Riddick Moss, which is pretty much what Emma's been calling him for months anyway. And Moss was also referred to as Riddick by Karrion Kross during his promo on last week's SmackDown. So all in all, this has been a rather telegraphed change. But it does seem to coincide with Moss's now more serious heel persona, which has been introduced in recent weeks. And while it hasn't actually done anything for his win-loss record as of yet, at least now, arguably one of the worst WWE names in history can finally be put to bed. Speaking of WWE and weird naming conventions, if you watch this week's Raw, you may have noticed an oft-repeated moniker for Brock Lesnar, because Lesnar was referred to by commentary as the most decorated combat sports star of all time. Now, WWE does have a track record for doing egregious stuff like this, such as calling WrestleMania 38 the most stupendous WrestleMania, for example. And yeah, it's often really annoying and really forced. And it seems like this latest one is a deliberate move on WWE's part. Nobody knows why, though. Because according to Fightful Select, it was made a point to hammer home Brock's new moniker on Raw. So yeah, get used to it. Maybe we'll get some merch out of that too if we're lucky. Just hundreds of belts. Hopefully this is all just to add an impressive extra layer to Cody Rhodes' eventual win over Lesnar at Backlash, and then he can get a t-shirt saying, I beat the most decorated combat sports star of all time. Big American flag. Dog. Oh, these t-shirts, they make themselves. They make themselves. Now, we've spoken about injury at length on this week's show so far, and it's something that plagues most wrestlers. And now here with a bang up-to-date report on another hot young star's injury is our medical correspondent, Dr. Sigmund Freud.
Breaking news! The wrestler known as Stone's Coulter Stephen Austin has been run over by a car. This has just happened right now at Survivor Series 1999, and already the public are thinking that this could be the end of the Rattling Snake's career. But do not fear, Dr. Sigmund Freud is here to expose the truth. In reality, Mr. Austin will be walking again in a matter of minutes. Hypothesis. In medical terms, being hit by a car of this magnitude is actually very soft and comfortable. He was struck at a mere 35 miles per hour. For him, this was nothing. I have been struck in this way many times before by my ex-wife and eternal rival, Dr. Stethoscope. Hippocratic oath, Stephanie? More like hypocritical oath. Motive! Stone's Colder faked his injuries so he could escape and play the role of Stella in A Streetcar Named Desire. Reports from viewing audiences say they were left cold. Stone cold. Subscription! Please subscribe, or I'll run you over.
He does know that's 20 years out of date, doesn't he? Are we sure he knows what he's on about? I don't know. Don't have a go at me. Don't have a go. I'm just here. I'm paid to read the prompter. I'm paid to read the prompter. Idiots. It's on there. It says idiots. Dickheads. Anyway, it's safe to say that this week has been yet another just sort of typically Phil Brooks kind of week. Meaning just when you think things have finally settled down in the life of Punk with his AEW return seemingly imminent and AEW even going so far as to give him his own show, with which he'll only appear with probably FTR, he then shows up backstage in WWE of all places. For all we know, it might be nothing more than a happy accident with Punk running into some old colleagues on a flight and him then deciding on a whim to go and try and make amends and heal some old wounds. Or he could have been sent by Tony Khan to infiltrate the enemy and gain valuable intel to bring back to AEW. I like that one. That's much more exciting. Regardless of what actually happened backstage at Raw, it seems like Punk's AEW return is still on course with the 17th of June show at the United Center looking to be the stage for his grand comeback. Now, while this seems rather set in stone at this point, there were some important issues to iron out first, namely the much discussed meeting between Punk and Chris Jericho. Now, that meeting was said to be in order to get Punk and Jericho onto the same page and potentially in a good enough place to work with each other upon Punk's return. Something that seems wildly unlikely for Punk and his other enemies, the Elite and Jon Moxley. There will be no sitting at any tables for them. Not you. Shut up. And now we know how the whole thing went. And as you can probably tell by it not being the headline of today's video, it was actually rather uneventful according to Fightful Select. So there was no drama, no fights, nobody got bitten. I miss when men were men and biting each other backstage and carrying dogs out in their arms like a bodyguard. Anyway, Fightful notes that the seemingly calm get-together was surprising considering the issues the two had. The rather uneventful meeting was also said by PW Torch's Wade Keller and the Wrestling Observer's Dave Meltzer to have went well. So well, maybe there's hope for him after all. He's learning. You can teach an old dog new tricks. Ominously, however, Fightful would note that a source familiar with the situation said, well, it's a positive that Jericho and Punk didn't fight. And then they followed up jokingly saying, well, yet. Another pointed towards Punk's recent history as well as Jericho's long-term history of welcoming confrontation as potential points of worry for the future. But you know what? That's the future. That's the future. Let's forget about the future. We'll all be dead soon anyway. I'm sure Phil and Jericho can coexist. 10 minutes. But what of two stars who very much followed in Punk's footsteps around this time last year when they up and left an episode of Monday Night Raw and they just never came back? That, of course, being Mercedes Moné and Naomi, aka Trinity Fatu. While Mercedes is seemingly having an absolute blast over in Japan, despite recently losing her IWGP Women's Championship to Mayu Iwatani at Stardom's All-Star Queendom event on Sunday, what of Trinity? Well, despite things being very, very quiet on her side for a while now, the rumour mill has been spinning up again lately, particularly after the former two-time SmackDown Women's Champion showed up recently backstage at GCW's Scene of the Crime event on April 22nd. However, that seems to have been a bit of a red herring, as it is now being reported that Trinity's actual next move will in fact be to go to Impact Wrestling, according to PW Insider Elite. Now, while her debut date is not yet known, Impact have been doing a fair bit of teasing lately regarding a major surprise, so it could yet be Trinity. Now, this is obviously great news to see Trinity potentially stepping back into the ring soon. However, as for Banks, despite some question marks surrounding her future and a potential move back stateside, it seems that Japan is set to remain her home for the short term at least. Because according to Fightful Select, NJPW sources are hopeful that they can continue working with Mercedes Moné, with the relationship being a positive one, although she's not anchored to anything long term. Now, Moné is set to compete in a tournament to crown the inaugural NJPW Strong Women's Champion on May 21st, and could interestingly compete against AEW's Willow Nightingale, who is also in that tournament. And you know what? That'd be a lot of fun. I blooming well hope that happens. Also, perhaps a little sneaky Forbidden Door tease in there. Maybe. The winner of the new WWE World Heavyweight Championship has been leaked. Watch on to find out more.
Belt, hey! There's been talk surrounding the belt itself since its unveiling on Raw, and now we might know who will be winning the belt for the first time at Night of Champions. WrestleVotes via Give Me Sport is reporting that Seth Rollins is Triple H's leading candidate to win the belt in Saudi Arabia.